the parsha begins, Zosa brocha shabirish birach Moshe ish Elokim. So Moshe is identified regarding the brocha as ish Elokim. He's not referred to ish Hashem, or he's not referred to Eved Hashem. So if you take a look in the Ramban, ish Elokim lagit hi berchoso mukuyemes. That this bracha is a bracha which will actually take effect and be effective. Why? Ki ish Elokim hoyo utfil sisharim ritzono. Since he was ish Elokim, therefore it's considered tfilas yisharim ritzono. It's a tefillah of a yosher. In a yikra kosel Moshe Rabbeinu ish Elokim cheshar anavim ve'eliyo zilosam. Lo yomar hakosel ish Hashem. They're not referred to ish Hashem. Avol yomar Moshe Eved Hashem. He's saying interesting. All the other Nevi'im are called ish. Moshe is called Eved Hashem. Vatem Yedu El Chomaskil. Okay? Chinder Emes, Kabbalistic. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh cites a Gemara. The Gemara says that to be able to be perfect enough, to be able to tolerate the Midas Hadin. We know Elokim is the appellation for Midas Hadin. Now, how perfect do you have to be for Midas Hadin? We find that I mentioned, the Gemara says that it's a medrash that although during the Great Flood there were tzaddikim, the tzaddikim did not survive the Great Flood. Why? That since there was Midas Hadin in effect, for Midas Hadin you have to be perfect. If you're not perfect, you don't survive. It's Gemara in Sanhedrin. But the Gemara in Sanhedrin doesn't say that tzaddikim perished in the Mabul, in the Great Flood. But the medrash says they perished, they were tzaddikim. So why did they survive? Because when Midas Hadin is in effect, it's not mavchin bein tzaddik l'rosha. It doesn't discern between tzaddik and rosha. So why did Noach survive? Noach motzachem b'nei Hashem. It's not because only he was a tzaddik. He found special favor in the eyes of Hashem. That's why he survived it. But otherwise, he should have also perished. Because he was motzachem b'nei Hashem. He had something, an additional feature which the others didn't have. And for that reason, he was motzachem b'nei Hashem. However, the Midrash says, the Gemara says, besides the Gemara, that even the Avos HaKadoshim, as perfect as they weren't perfect enough to be able to tolerate the Midas Hadin. The level of perfection you have to be to tolerate it, even they were not perfect enough. The Avos HaKadoshim. Moshe Rabbeinu was Ish Elokim. He was so perfect, spiritually speaking, that even he would be able to tolerate the Midas Hadin. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu is depicted here as Ish Elokim, rather than Ish Hashem or Eved Hashem. And once I bring out that point, he's Ish, what's Ishi? He's Ish Elokim. And therefore, that's why his bracha had special value, that it's coming literal. And that's the reason why we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the conduit for the Torah. The Chazal tell us that the only person who was qualified to receive the Torah at Sinai was only Moshe Rabbeinu. No one else was perfect enough to receive the Torah. What did Moshe have special? We know that Moshe's midah, his main attribute was emes, was truth. Emes, unadulterated emes, is midas hadin. We had mentioned the Gemara in Avodah Zorah, that the Gemara says in Avodah Zorah that a person during the first 3 hours of Rosh Hashanah should not say Musaf bi'chidus, without a minyan. Why? Because the first 3 hours of the day, it's the most exacting moment where Hashem sits and studies Torah. And because he studies Torah, it's a time of emes. As Shlomo says in Mishlei, emes kenei al timkor, acquire truth and don't sell it. When Hashem studies Torah, it's unadulterated truth. And since the Midas Hadin is in effect at that moment, because when he studies Torah, it's emes on the absolute level, therefore, unless you have schus hatzibur, you're davening with tzibur, you should not say musaf, because musaf we say zichronos. We want Hashem to remember us in a good vein, and since it's a time of din, which is emes, therefore a person should not say musaf as an individual, only as part of its tzibur. That's emes. So Torah is emes. Moshe Rabbeinu, his midah was emes. Where do we see his midah? Even Yaakov, his midah was emes, but not at Moshe Rabbeinu. We find Moshe Rabbeinu he comes out of the palace and he sees an Egyptian beating a Jew. And Moshe Rabbeinu understands who he is, that he's the only advocate for Klal Yisrael. He's the only Jew in the palace. And the Medrash tells us that Moshe was more beloved to Paro than anybody else. He was like his favorite grandchild, although he was adopted. He was taken out of the water by his daughter. Doesn't make a difference. When he killed the Egyptian, he understood what he was putting into jeopardy. Because if Paro, should find out, the advocate in the palace it's over. But don't you really putting everything in jeopardy? The answer is, if your meat is emes, there's no calculation. Doing anything less than he did then would have been a breach of emes. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu responded and killed the Egyptian. Moshe Rabbeinu flees to Midian. What does he see in Midian? Moshe is a fugitive. He sees the daughters of Yisro being attacked by shepherds, male shepherds. He immediately jumps into the fray, beats them away, and he waters the flock. I mean, you want to be under the radar. You'll be found out. How do you go do something seemingly so irresponsible? The answer is, if your meat is emes, you will not tolerate anything which is a breach of emes. Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the way he responded, because his meat of emes. The Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that mitzvah lasos pshora, that when a court has to adjudicate between two defendants, if you could convince the people to go into a compromise, each one should compromise. It's called pshora. It's mediation. It's better mediation. Not to do din. Because din, one person is found guilty, the other one isn't. The one person has to pay, and the other person doesn't have to pay. But if each one gives a little bit, and one takes a little bit, they'll leave both in peace. There'll be peace between them. So mitzvah lasos pshora. And the Gemara says, Aaron always made pshora. Moshe Rabbeinu never made pshora. Moshe Rabbeinu never entered into a mediation setting. Why? Because Yaakov hadin esahor, that if you have a mountain and it's contradictory to the din pierces the mountain. You remove the mountain. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. So I asked the question, if the Gemara says mitzvah lasos pshora, you mean Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to do a mitzvah? Mitzvah lasos pshora. If you can mediate, why put down din, which is unadulterated, either innocent or guilt, right? So the way I explained with the same idea. Who's Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu was Torah. Torah is emes. Chosom Yishal HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes. God's signet is truth. The Gemara says on Shabbos. So because God, if that is your persona, truth, and you never compromise truth, and he represents Torah, if that's the case, the only way he's able to approach anything is through with emes, which din. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu's approach was always Yaakov ad din esahor. The din pierces the mountain. Aaron, which was not that, therefore he goes into the mediation situation. Mitzvah lasos pshora. Moshe Rabbeinu had no relevance to pshora, because what does he represent? He represents truth. Truth is either you're innocent or you're guilty. There's no other cheshbon. One doesn't have any other calculation other than emes. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yaakov ad din esahor. Elokim is midas hadin. Because his whole persona, to the nth degree, was uncompromising truth. And that's why there was no separation between him and Hashem. He could be the conduit, because he reflected the midah of emes to that degree. Therefore, he was able to receive the Torah. Who's this bracha coming from? Zos bracha asher berach Moshe ish Elokim. So the Chaim HaKadosh explains, he was the only human being who could ever tolerate the midas hadin, because that was his midah of emes. Even the Ovos HaKadoshim one did not have that level of emes, which Moshe did have. Now, there's a question which is asked by Reda Bachya in Parshas Vayigash. He asks, the most special of the Ovos HaKadoshim was Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu fathered the 12 tribes. They were the Shiftei Koch. Why did that Kodesh Baruch Hu give the Torah to Yaakov and his children? Why did he wait for Sinai, and only then they gave Torah to Klal Yisrael. That's the Rabbeinu Bachi's question. So Rabbeinu Bachi answers that for the Torah to be given, you need a setting of 600,000 men above the age of 20. That's the setting. And since Yaakov, as special as he was, you didn't have that number, that critical mass, therefore, that's why he didn't give the Torah to Yaakov and his children. That's the Rabbeinu Bachi's answer. Okay, you have to have 600, there's a morale why you have to have 600,000 men above the age of 20. Because that's like the ultimate number. 100,000, 1,000, 100, 600,000. Okay, not going to that. But the way we're saying now, even though we say Titin Emes Yaakov, what was the need of Yaakov was Emes also, because Yaakov personified truth, because Yaakov Ishtam Yoshe Ba'olim, he's the patriarch of Torah. Nevertheless, even though Titin Emes Yaakov, his Emes was not the Emes of what? Of Moshe Rabbeinu. It wasn't on that level. As a result of that, if we're saying the only one who could be the conduit to receive the Torah, this is as a mitzvah osa, as an obligation, where Hashem speaks face to face to the person. That's the way Moshe Rabbeinu always communicated. It wasn't b'chalom. It wasn't in a sleep state. It was always in a wake state. That's only because that's who he was, because he had the capacity to tolerate that direct communication. Therefore, he could be the conduit. Even Yaakov Avinu, as much as he was a Navi, as much as he was the most special of all the patriarchs, he was not at that level of emes, and therefore, as a result of that, the Torah being to be given as the word of Hashem at that special level, it was only Moshe Rabbeinu who was Ish Elokim, because he was the Ish Elokim. Therefore, so the bracha here that Moshe is given Klal Yisrael, it's the equivalent coming directly from God Himself, because He Himself, there's no separation between Him and Hashem. Because He was Nachnu Mo, He was negated to Hashem. There wasn't a trace of Himself, other than His being was fully HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because man's inclination is evil from the time he's cast from its mother's womb. Hashem says, therefore, I will not destroy the world again. And that's when He made a covenant. That's the rainbow. With the world, He will not bring a great flood on the world to destroy the world. Because man is inclined. Therefore, he cannot in any way activate and evaluate the world with that exactness. Can't do it. So now there's Rachmin. And even when He destroyed it, right? I mean, we read in Pirkei Avos that Hashem waited 10 generations till Avram Avinu. And it says why? It shows to what degree He's tolerant. He's Erech HaPayim, how much patience He has. Right? And it says, and Avram kibel schar keneged kulam. Avram received reward, which is equivalent of all 10 generations. Because what they were supposed to accomplish, he accomplished. See, what I'm saying now is a little difficult with Rabbeinu Yonah, the way he explains that Mishnah Pirkei Avos. He says like this: the reason why Hashem destroyed the world after 10 generations with Noach, because the world has to meet a minimum criteria of value. And if it doesn't meet the minimum value, Hashem says, I'm pulling the plug on all humanity. Noach was not great enough that he was able to make up for what the generation did not address. Therefore, he destroyed the generation. The only one who remained was Noach, was starting all over, because he was no Motzechem Ineshem. Avram Avinu, as evil as they were, he says he didn't destroy the world, is because Avram Avinu was able to address what they were supposed to address over 10 generations, and he addressed it, because Avram was much greater than Noach. As a result of that, the world wasn't destroyed, because Avram was able to bring the minimum standard to give the world value to continue. That's the Rabbeinu Yonah. It seems from over there that even there, if they failed to such a level, the world would not continue. We would have had a repeat of the Dor HaMabul, because God says, I'm not going to tolerate it. So how do you reconcile it with the bris? Hashem made a covenant with the world. He will not destroy it again. So maybe what we'll say is this, that since Hashem knows the future, as a result that He knows there's going to be an Avram Avinu, therefore He could put that covenant in place not to destroy the world, because there's going to be an Avram Avinu who's going to actually pick up the slack and meet the minimum value which the world has to have to continue. That's the only way we can reconcile. I mean, it's a question of Rabbeinu Yonah. There's a bris, there's a covenant with the world. He will not destroy the world. Rabbeinu Yonah says if Avram Avinu wouldn't have met the minimum standard which the world needed, he would have destroyed the world. And that's why it's Avram Kibel Starkin and Kulam. Avram received reward versus all 10 generations.
And
Answer. But it's based on a medrash. It says the three most humble people were Moshe was Nachnu Mo, I'm nothing. Avram said, Anochi Ofa Vapor, I'm dust, I'm ash, which is something. And David says, Nochi Tolei Velush, I'm a worm, I'm not a person, but a worm is a living entity. It's still more than dust. He's the third most humble person. So I ask the question, David Amel, we find that in Pasha Shmini, when we speak about the kosher species, non-kosher species, it says that it's Tazria, we first speak about the laws which pertain to the person. Woman gives birth, it's a male, a female, the laws of contamination, then we speak about dietary laws. So we speak about Torah's Adam, and then we speak of Torah's Behemoth. We speak the laws pertain to the person, then the laws pertain to the animal, meaning the kosher species, non-kosher species. So Reb Simloi says, Rashi cites Reb Simloi, that if you live according to the Torah, we say you preceded the animal. And if you don't abide by the Torah, we say yitush kodmoch, yitush, the flea preceded you. If you're purely a physical entity, the flea preceded you. If you're spiritual, live a spiritual life, then you're first and foremost. But if it's not for the sake of your spirituality, yitush kodmoch, the flea preceded you. So I ask the question, if David is the most humble person, third most humble person, what is Anochi Tolei Veluish? He should say Anochi Yitush Veluish. Yitush is the flea. What do you say a worm? It's a question I once asked. So then I come upon a medrash that we find there's a pasuk in Novi where Yaakov is called Tolas Yaakov. He's referred to the Toleah, Tolas Yaakov. Yaakov is like a Toleah. Why is it called the Toleah? Because it's interesting. The cedar tree is the most majestic tree. And the worm has the ability to topple a cedar tree. This little measly creature could topple. How? Because the worm has a certain saliva, and then when it eats into the base of the tree, that saliva weakens the base, and ultimately the tree topples over. So the mouth of the worm, although it's very pliable and soft, how do you go and topple such a majestic tree? The saliva that comes from its mouth eats away at the base, and eventually the tree topples. So the Medrash says that we say Hakol Kol Yaakov Yadayim Esav. What's Yaakov's power? His mouth. Just as the Toleah, the power is in its mouth to topple the cedar, the majestic cedar. Identically, Yaakov's power was the Kol Kol Yaakov, was his Koach HaTfilah and his power of Torah, which is verbalization. Okay, that's why David says Nochi Tolei Veluish. All his accomplishments, he conquered Eretz Yisrael, he killed Goliath, whatever he did, Anochi Tolei Veluish. It's not me, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was through my Koach HaTfilah that I was able to achieve all this. That's the ultimate level of demonstration, expression of humility. It's not me. How did I do it? Koach HaTfilah. That's how I did it. But nevertheless, he was the third versus the lineup. Moshe, the ultimate, Avram the second, and David the third. Zosa brocha, asher berach Moshe ish Elokim. This is the brocha, which Moshe the ish Elokim is blessing Klal Yisrael. Now, there was a Sefarno, if you remember, at the beginning it says that when Yitzchak summons Esav to receive a bracha, he says, I'm nearing the end of my life, therefore I want to give you a bracha before I die. and I want you to go hunt something to bring me your catch to make delicacies for me before I pass away. So over there, Rashi cites Chazal that if a person is within 5 years of either his mother's life or father's life, there's a chance the person may not live beyond that time. So therefore, he wanted to give the bracha to Esav before he passed away, because he didn't know if it's to be within the years of his mother, who was 127 when she passed away, or Avraham Avinu was 175. So since he was within the years of his mother, he summoned the Esav. Okay? So the question is, the Sephara says over there that the bracha that comes from a person, the more spiritual he is, the more effective is the bracha. And he says over there that we find that Yitzchak gave the bracha to Esav, thought he may be nearing death. Yaakov Avinu, he blessed Klal Yisrael before he passed away. Why? Because he says a bracha is a spiritual concept. And the more spiritual the person is, the greater is the effectiveness and the value of that bracha. When a person passes away, the neshama already detaches partially from the body. It's not fully embedded in the physicality of the person. As a result of that, right before a person passes away, if he gives the bracha then, it's a more effective bracha. That's a sifarno. That's the reason why Yitzchak gave the bracha, not knowing it may be near the time he pass away. Therefore, the bracha is the more effective bracha. And Yaakov, same thing. He truly, right after he gave the bracha, he passed away, because that was the ultimate moment where the bracha would have the greatest effect. Because he was most spiritual, because the neshama is as perfect as Yaakov was. But right before he passed away, the neshama already had detached from his physicality, so it was a more effective bracha. That's the Sefarno. Moshe Rabbeinu, you can imagine, he's Ish Elokim. Even when he was alive, he was what? It was Nachnu Mo. But there's no question. After he passed away, when his neshama was out of his body, he was even greater. This is the last day of his life. Zosa bracha asherberach Moshe Ish Elokim espedei lifnei moso. This is right before he dies. He's giving this bracha. So you can imagine, as a fully healthy human being living, his bracha is phenomenal. It's Ish Elokim. But here it's even more so. It's because it's lifnei moso. The Ish Elokim lifnei moso, you can imagine what the impact of that bracha was. Based on what the Sefarno said, that when the neshama is about to leave, that's when the what comes from that neshama is at the ultimate level.